Sir Ian McKellen brilliantly plays Gandalf, and in the third film, we know him as Gandalf the White. I believe that his costume kind of has like a sense of mythology to the character. Am I onto something, or am I just making this up?
You're just making it up.
Yeah, okay.
But I love it, and you stick with it.
Welcome to the Art of Costume Podcast. I'm Elizabeth Joy Glass.
And I'm Spencer Williams. Elizabeth, it's here, the season finale.
3 seasons, Spencer. We've done 3 seasons.
Wow. And this season has been a season.
It has been a wild ride.
Yeah.
Like, just from, I feel like this season, like, we really, hit our rhythm in terms of like how our episodes are formatted.
Mm-hmm.
And
the amount of guests we had was absolutely exhausting in the best way possible.
Yeah.
I mean, it was suddenly we had interviews with Colleen Atwood and Deborah Scott and Catherine Martin, and it just kept on. Aggie Rogers, it just kept on going.
It kept on going and going, and like I don't know, I'm proud of us that we figured where we fit into everything. And
yeah, I'm very proud of what we delivered this season. And with that being said, we still got more coming up in the new year. So thank you all so much for listening this year. It really has been a wild ride, and I'm very, very proud. What were some of your favorite episodes? It's hard to even think there
Spencer.
were so many.
I know. I'm I also I'll think of something and then I'm like, wait, was that season 2? I gotta say, I loved our Catherine Martin March and our spooky October series. First off, Catherine Martin March, getting to speak with the legend herself. That was incredible. And then, like you said, our interviews have just been so amazing, because then we come to October and we get to speak to Kate Holly. What is happening?
Yeah, that was definitely one of my favorite episodes, was the Crimson Peak with Kate Holly. I mean, we were working on that one for so long, so when it actually happened, it kind of was like, is it actually happening right now?
Right?
I loved the Penny Dreadful episode. That one's kind of near and dear to my heart, yes, because I thought it was going to flop disastrously, and everyone loved it just as much as we did, and I had so much fun doing it. Oh man, I mean, I could go forever and ever.
I know. I also love that episode because it's one of those times where I'm like, oh, this is a full circle moment where the two of us have loved something and talked about it for so long. And it's an influence on us as artists and content creators. And then today, I feel like we just made our ultimate full circle episode.
Right. I mean, it's been a whirlwind. I just can't even. Just a few more episodes I had to shout out to was I loved doing The Last of Us, Avatar: The Way of Water. Blade Runner was a particular favorite of mine because
we did that this year.
Yeah, I feel like that one was really, really cool in what we learned about the costumes. And of course, I have to say, I really loved the Mandalorian episode, the interview I did with Shauna Terpsik. That one is something that's very, very near and dear to my heart. And I'm glad that we all get to look back on that episode and just hear her voice and learn about her process and her love for creativity. So that's an episode I really enjoy and proud that we did. And yeah, like you said, here we are for the most full circle episode that we could ever possibly do. Elizabeth, what are we watching today?
Today, we completed our Lord of the Rings trilogy, which probably most of you have not heard. This week, we watched The Return of the King.
Oh, man. Yeah, so Elizabeth hinted at this, but the first 2 movies of The Lord of the Rings we did for our Patreon series, which didn't exactly take off.
No.
But those episodes are gold because Elizabeth and I are drunk in both of them, and we really have a good time. So we were really sad that we didn't get to finish the series. So we were like, you know what better way to finish this season than with The Return of the King, which is also celebrating a 20th anniversary.
Oh, yeah.
So.
And I love it for us because, like, I'm like, we based our friendship off two things: Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, very true. And we've been watching these movies. I mean, we said in the last episode, but these movies and the costumes are like so integral to the directory of our lives, actually.
Oh, yeah. I got my first costume design job because I said how much I liked Lord of the Rings in the interview. That's literally watching the behind the scenes. It's how all of this started.
Yeah. And for me, I just feel like my creativity and imagination just stemmed from reading and watching The Lord of the Rings and enjoying the costume. So let's get into it, Elizabeth. I'm going to hit us with a summary. The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. The conclusion to Peter Jackson's epic trilogy based on a timeless J.R.R. Tolkien classic, The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, presents the final confrontation between the forces of good and evil, fighting for control of the future of Middle-earth. Hobbits Frodo and Sam reach Mordor in their quest to destroy the One Ring, while Aragorn leads the forces of good against Sauron's evil army at the stone city of Minas Tirith. And that is The Return of the King. And boy, did that sound nerdy reading that out loud. But I love it.
That's why we love Lord of the Rings, though. It's our childhood nerdiness. And then this is probably me going a little bit too deep into it. One thing I haven't watched yet is the biopic of J.R.R. Tolkien. It's on my list for this holiday season, actually. But getting older and you learn about his life and the history that surrounds his writing of the Lord of the Rings. Especially just with its commentary on war and what it means to step up in times of trouble. I feel it resonates even more now as an adult than as a kid. And you're like, oh my gosh, look, it's Eowyn and Arwen, and I want to be like that.
And for me, it's always been about the idea of just having to step outside and do scary things and, find courage in yourself to rise to the occasion and push yourself across, borders that you never thought you could ever surpass. That's what I've always loved about the Lord of the Rings. Take us behind the costumes, Elizabeth.
Yes, we are going behind the costumes with director Peter Jackson and costume designers Ngila Dickson and Richard Taylor. You will know Ngila's work from Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, Zena, Warrior Princess, The Last Samurai, for which she received an Academy Award nomination, Dracula Untold, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Sword of Destiny, and this year's Peter Pan and Wendy. And you'll also be seeing some more of her work in the upcoming Madam Web.
I'm excited for that one. I love me some Sydney Sweeney.
Yeah.
Well, Elizabeth, we don't really have a behind the costume facts because it's actually happening. We actually have costume designer Ngila Dickson here with us today to talk about the Lord of the Rings. I'm freaking out right now. You're freaking out. We haven't really been able to even talk because we're just so nervous and ready to go. But so we're gonna take a little break, and when we come back, we're gonna be speaking with the legend herself, Ngila Dickson. Welcome back, costume nerds. Well, this is the moment we have all been waiting for. Elizabeth and I are honored to welcome Academy Award-winning costume designer Ngila Dickson. Ngila, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you.
We're very excited to talk to you. Elizabeth and I talk about your work all the time, and when we kind of talked about having you on the podcast, we kind of just laughed at each other and thought there's no way we could even find her at this point. Yet here you are. So thanks for coming.
No, the timing is really good, actually, isn't it? At the moment, New Zealand time works well for the US right now. So
yeah, we had to do a little bit of math, but we're here. So let's get into it. So this episode's coming out on December 19th, just 2 days after the 20th anniversary of The Lord of the Rings Return to King. So before we jump into it, when you hear that, where does your mind go? Because me and Elizabeth, I mean, it's hard for us to even 20 years. That's crazy. So
I don't think about it.
Does it feel like 20 years?
Yes and no. Some parts of it seem like yesterday. I'm still incredibly close with a lot of the people who worked on Lord of the Rings. We continue to work together. You know, our lives cross paths. So, and a lot of the things that I learnt on Lord of the Rings has helped in film world for me. So sometimes, as I said, it seems like yesterday, and other times it's a land far, far away.
Well, to me, it feels just like yesterday. I remember seeing this one specifically in theaters. Not really the first two, but this one I remember because it started off so scary. But before we get into Lord of the Rings, having worked on such iconic projects such as Hercules and Zena, and of course, Heavenly Creatures of Peter Jackson, how do you feel those experiences prepared you for the challenge of working on this massive trilogy, especially since I read multiple times that you were unsure about leaving Zena to work on The Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
I mean, change is scary. So
yeah, well, it wasn't so much about change. It was the good time that I was having on Zena and Herc. And both of these instances really informed a lot of things to do with Lord of the Rings. Obviously, with Heavenly Creatures, I had worked with Pete before. So, and I would say that it did give me some understanding. It ultimately didn't give me enough understanding of, what we were all diving into, but that was the best and the worst of it anyway. I certainly learnt on Heavenly Creatures that, when Pete has an idea and a view and a number, you need to produce it.
Right.
And or woe betide you. So it's, and that was more about, his deep disappointment if you fail to provide. So even, working on a film like that, which was just low to no budget, he still had such high expectations. And Zena and Herc, well, fast turnaround television, an episode every 10 days, doing the two shows simultaneously. I had a staff of about 70 people by the time I left. And that was all about invention, like we were still not in the world of, internet access, all of that reachability. So much of it was still research based and general experimentation and, hey, what a good idea, let's give it a go. And all of those attitudes, which absolutely informed all of this kind of work, fun, experimental, anything went, it was, and if you failed on one, you could pick up that idea on another one and follow it through and figure out something there. And as part of that, I was surrounded by so many really brilliant young creatives out of art school, off the street, because New Zealand didn't have we don't have the institutionalization, if there is such a word, of costuming, of filmmaking that the rest of the world has. And a part of me kind of misses that has gone with all our interconnectedness. I felt that our separation, our imagination, our sometimes completely wrong understanding of how something was done or built really took us down roads where no one else went. But of course, now that's taken out of your hands.
Let's get into the Lord of the Rings. Obviously, costume design plays an essential role in bringing Middle-earth to life. How did you approach the challenge of creating costumes that not only fit the characters, but also contributed to the overall visual storytelling of the film, especially with the added challenge of shooting 3 films at once? So what did your prep and continued work look like over that time period?
I think Alan Lee was really important to me, that to have those guys, the illustrators, who were so steeped in Lord of the Rings, and Alan being such a sweetheart in his malleability, really. He will have drawn something and I would go, hey, but what if we, and he was just an incredibly open person. And he would take from things I showed him or things we talked about, and he would just draw it into his world. So Grant Major, Alan Lee creatively, massive, we were right next door to each other in that shite old building that we were all working in. And, in between wind gusts and Wellington. And it was, it was the place to go and sit and take a deep breath when when you're deathly afraid sometimes. The pressure was crazy. And
I'm sure.
we started late. I can't remember. I do remember, and again comes that naivety. I know that our prep time was crazily short for a show of this magnitude. And again, in a way, what you don't know really helps you,
Yeah.
I mean, if you knew you should have 20 weeks or something, or more to develop these kinds of ideas, it would have seemed way more impossible to do.
Right.
Yeah.
But I had read Lord of the Rings when I was in my 20s, and I never went back to it. At one point, I made a call that I had so many people who were obsessed, deeply obsessed with Lord of the Rings as a story, that I decided that my best approach to it was to, I guess, helicopter, be the aerial view, see it as worlds and create those worlds and then film it with people.
Oh,
And
I love that.
And so I was just really interested in creating very strong individual worlds, and a simplicity to it, which really suits the books and the worlds that he created. I think it's, you wander a really fine line with something like this, is if you get too detailed, you start to lose the cohesiveness of a real world.
Mm.
And so that's what I was always looking for. What are the fabrics of the elven world? What's the color of the elven world? What is the background, to the hobbits? What makes the hobbits different? And, and I feel every time to talk about this, I will be endlessly repeating whatever it is you've read, because
No.
none of those things particularly change. And the hobbits, in fact, I meant to look for it, but I was in such a hurry this morning. I've got a folder here of all the original sketches and things.
Oh, wow.
And the doodles while I was thinking about it. And the absolute essence of the hobbits was those short pants.
That's, yeah.
I love
I can
the
see
Hobbit
that.
pants.
Yeah.
As soon as I had made that call that they had short pants and they had kind of short sleeves, and you had these little delicate, these lovely big hairy feet, actually. But, there was a naivety and a sense of children growing out of their clothes. So that very much And then the colors were very autumnal of those worlds, very, that beautiful time of year when, all the leaves are changing color. Though that really did inform Hobbits.
That's so funny. Just the little simple nuances really bring to life these characters.
Yeah, and I think if I hadn't thought about it like that, we would have really got ourselves into trouble. Sometimes if you overdevelop an idea, you can drown.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, especially in Return of the King. There's a whole wide range of these worlds specifically that you had to create. I've always especially loved Rohan and some of the like Anglo-Saxon Norse influence. How did you approach their design, especially since they do have a little bit more intricacy in terms of embroidery?
Yeah, well, and this comes back to this thing of switching and talking with Grant, and seeing what the art department was doing, and making sure that costume wasn't out on its own, that the language that the art department was developing in the Great Hall, and all of the decorative elements that were beginning to appear, it became a bit of a swap meet of ideas. And so you'd go over to the art department, you'd see something that they were working on, and vice versa. Like we would start working on an embroidery, and it is absolutely very much that Anglo-Saxon world that I wanted. Like it. And again, because these are such extraordinary books of their time of Englishness.
Yes.
Right.
It was, and it's funny that I'm a New Zealander, so many steps away from that, and you're Americans. We're all the offshoots of all of that world, and that looking at medieval costume, and that was one of the other things that I found really interesting as I went along the way, was that you find that you can drift across the centuries, but you have to do it really carefully, that at no point do you want to lose your audience while you're doing that. Like you've somehow got to hold them in the world. And I'm a bit like you guys. I think this was really successful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It just all worked. And Miranda was just fabulous. In fact, the casting of this was pitch perfect. And,
Yeah.
and we were talking about this quite recently, actually, because I've been working for quite a while this year on a show which isn't dissimilar, as in it's a fantasy show, and it's in another world, like it's a adjacent world, and it's always about how far can you push things while holding the audience and making them feel comfortable in that space.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a really interesting conundrum, and to not overdo and not underdo, no undercooking as you go along the way. And then, at other times it's just sheer desperation. I've got 24 hours. I need a frock on that girl. What am I going to do?
Yeah. Well, like you said, I feel like Rohan was very successful, and it's so immersive. You kind of want to live there. But then when you get to Minas Tirith, I always felt like you were trying to make it where it felt very cold at the same time, where it's a little bit more rich and polished, but there's something about that's a little bit more haunting.
I mean, it was meant to be darker. It was meant to be cleaner. It was meant to be richer. So that the world of Rohan was so much more. I mean, I guess in that way it was between the hobbits. Like you need that, and also I come back to the build. I mean, the sort of marble and the coldness to everything, the style of this character, just using the silvers and the greys and the midnight blues and the, like that sort of, that sterile quality was a really big part of that. And it's kind of odd because it almost, like, if you're that immersed in something and you've been at it for that long, it just almost happens all by itself. That, I mean, I know, that's probably an incredibly unhelpful thing to say, but
no, not at all.
It's, and also what was going on down at Weta, they were a few blocks away. You have to get in your car to go to Weta. And they just had walls and like they had young illustrators up the wazoo there, trying out ideas, walls covered in drawings. It absolutely, I used to love to go down there until I didn't, because I realized if I got too caught up in all of that level of experimentation, that I would never be able to get the stuff to set. We'd never get anything finished. And I think that was sort of, the momentum of the shows once we got going. You just had to move quickly, come up with things, solve a problem, and then always stand back and look at it almost like a cinematographer, really just look at how that whole color palette was working. And it's just really rare. And my agent at the time, I remember her saying to me, what is happening on this is so rare, Nyla. Enjoy it. I had no idea what she was talking about.
You're like, all right, whatever.
And 20 years later, I know exactly what she's talking about.
Yeah, you came by two nerds in America bothering you and emailing you.
Well, but it's also that thing of the magic of just the right group of people, the right cooking pot at the right time. And will that, can that repeat itself? Is that it can and it can't. And it's like a magic formula that unless you're which is a very tough ask here in this part of the world, which is my preferred place to be, is to repeat that magic. And so in a really strange way, when you don't even realize you're doing it, you're searching for it forever. God damn it.
Yeah, I'm like, well, that's pretty dark.
No going back.
Only in the back of your mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the opening of Return of the King is one of my favorite parts of all the movies, especially because we get to see Smeagle before he becomes Gollum. And I'm interested what you wanted the audience to know about Smeagle before he finds the ring.
You're asking me to dig deep for that one. I'm just looking at it, like he's like the lost Cuzzy, isn't he? Here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And the one who doesn't fit in.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably very much what was going on there. Like he's not as light and bright as our, core Hobbit characters. There's already a sort of a, off-center oddity to him as a character. And I would say, he is, if anything, the most hillbilly of the cousins. And I would, and just looking at that would be where I would say that, the thinking was with dear old Smeagle.
Yeah, I never noticed, but he does have kind of like an Addams Family type quality to him compared to all the hobbits, right?
Yeah. It's really it's so funny. I mean, because I have not seen these movies. I've seen them once.
What?
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And actually,
well, I guess you worked on them. You're like, I know this.
And also, we used to have to watch dailies every day, for years, felt like. So it's in many respects, seeing it is it's just full of I think I would forever question everything
Yeah.
with this. And go, God, why did we do that? And what was that about? And, we obviously didn't get enough sleep that night.
Yeah.
And so, but you're making me want to go and have a look.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have 4 copies of each DVD, so I could mail you one if you need one.
I think I've got one.
Okay, good. Well, Nyla, I've always wanted to ask you, one of my favorite aspects to costume design is the breakdown. And I think a great example of that is Frodo and Sam, who by the end of the film look horrible in a good way. They've gone through dirt, fight scenes, everything. So give us some insight on what your aging and dying breakdown process looked like. I imagine that you must have had workshops upon workshops.
Yes and no. I mean, again, I can remember when we were early in the shoot, we were in Queenstown and we were shooting, ballpark scene 3 and scene 503. And, so you're just making these incredibly random guesses as to what will have happened. In my mind, all I kept thinking of was, for God's sake, we're going to have to reshoot scene 503. So we'll just go for it and see what happens. And make these really bold and quite ballsy guesses at where the world would end up, and then hope like hell we could fill in the gaps as time went on. And we had, and I'm sure you've heard this infinite number of times. I mean, we had so many copies of these costumes that were all just lined up, waiting to be slotted into a particular part. So you could always go back and shoot that bit, or you had a reference point. I think there were at least 40 of each of the individual costumes.
Wow, so what mental gymnastics.
Yeah. So that you could, that you could kind of track and then hopefully look at what has been shot and figure out whether you can get away with adding more. I am an obsessive about breakdown. Like, I think it's only got worse over the years, and I have been lucky to work with some incredibly talented dyers, painters, breakdown artists, and there are no costumes without those people. And not many years, but I was doing a kind of crazy little TV show before Herc and Zena, and I remember I had a almost like a pirate coat, a sea captain coat on a dummy, and I was taking to it with a blowtorch because I knew that there was a particular feel that I wanted, and then paint brushes, and I had no training in any of these things. I was just and as you go further into this world and the quality and the talent, actually behind me on this wall is Captain Hook's waistcoat from Peter Pan and Wendy. And I arrived in Vancouver. I'd never worked I had worked in Canada before, but not with this team. Never met any of them before in my life. I landed in the middle of this. I had, I think, 12 weeks to pull that show together. And I remember asking the seamstresses to make me up a waistcoat front so I could give it to the breakdown team and say, this is what I want this to look like. I want the salt. I want the age. I want him to be, a dirty, grubby, unseemly chap, Captain Hook. He's never washed, changed. He's not a clean guy. And the girls did this unbelievable job. And I said, I'm taking this home with me and I'm framing it. And
there it is right there.
So that's how I feel about breakdown.
Yeah, Nyla's a woman of her word. She's not playing around.
Oh yeah.
That's important. It is the character, like you can create, like even if you're creating something that is supposed to be brand new, it has to be aged. It doesn't live in cinema well without a certain level of aging, so that it sort of bonds with the body. Anyway, there we are. That's enough of that.
Unlike Frodo and Sam, the elves aren't aging, and the costumes are so unique to where they each live geographically. How did you approach designing the costumes for the elves, especially since it's like their whole identity that they are elegant and beautiful?
Yeah. So it was really straightforward to me. I wanted those incredibly soft colors. They had to be silvery, like they needed to have a sort of glimmer to them. I was obsessed with Fortuny at the time. And later I actually was made an arts laureate here in New Zealand, which was a fabulous thing. And you get an amount of money, and that amount of money at the time, I was so broke, it just went into my bank account and life carried on. But I swore that money was to take me to Venice to, go to the Fortuny Museum and do all of those sorts of things. And which I finally did. And I'm really glad I did. So it was very steeped in that sort of Art Nouveau quality. And those velvets, which just drove the on-set girls insane.
In a good way?
Oh, no, not in a good way. Like trying to keep that, looking, but magic on screen.
Oh, yeah.
And, just the dyeing to get those beautiful shades. And then, of course, the jewelry team, particularly led by Jasmine, she just brought my drawings alive, in an A+ way. So it was, again, it comes back to simplicity. And I think if there was a golden rule to good filmmaking, it is, here's where all your detail needs to be, in that close-up frame and around the hands, and then just let everything else just be, was a really good recipe, particularly for these guys. And and then figuring out how we could do embroidery when we knew nothing about the fact that we could whip all this stuff up to China and it would be done in a nanosecond. That wasn't possible.
Right.
So hours of piped stitching later to create all of the embroidery. And of course, that is when I become a bit painful, because I knew exactly the shapes that they needed to be. And it all, even now in 2023, it weirdly stands up, doesn't it?
It does.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like they looked perfect then, and today you're like, this is just what I consider perfection.
Yeah. It's there's a really funny story about this. There was an elven walk that Peter had a tutor, he wanted a very particular movement to the elves. And it's, like when I'm looking at that one where they're coming through the trees.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so they all went off to their elven walk training. And on the day in the forest, it was absolutely hilarious. It was really bad. And I remember Pete going, no, right, no,
Oh, no.
not happening,
I would pay good money to see that. I can't imagine. What does that elven walk look like?
Yeah, it just did not really help things. So, no. And I mean, when you look at it, it's there in wearing those costumes, isn't it? It's, on a costume like that, you're going to slow down to a kind of meditative state, aren't you? You feel elegant. You're, it just happens to people. You put on these fabulous wigs and away they go. And that was probably, and I guess I wonder whether age and stage, but oh my God, I can remember so many moments on the set of Lord of the Rings when I was distraught, tired, didn't know, what problem to tackle next. And then to stand there for 5 minutes, take a deep breath and look at something kind of happen in front of you and go, it's good, looks good. You can have a wee pat on the back before you, go back there and fight the good fight all over again.
Yeah, you could cry later. This looks really nice.
Yeah, or sleep later. Yeah.
Well, Sir Ian McKellen brilliantly plays Gandalf, and in the third film, we know him as Gandalf the White. And I've kind of been like a nerdy philosophy guy about this character for a while. I believe that his costume kind of has like a sense of mythology to the character. Am I onto something, or am I just making this up?
You're just making it up.
Yeah. Okay.
But I love it, and you stick with it.
That's cool. I'm glad we put that to bed.
It in a way, it isn't. Like, how do you reach that? The mythology kind of comes with it happening. A lot of thought and a lot of effort went into what fabrics were used, and you would endlessly have heard stories about that goddamn hat. Like, is it big enough? Is it this? Is it that? Is it and the fact that it lived in a dustbin as it was the only place where you could keep them, and then it got thrown out because it was a dustbin.
Gosh.
It's like that kind of country quality that to move it, and in a way it is very true that it does become mythological, because he begins in that rough country wizard state, very much a part of the hobbit world, and as we move through, we're revealing who he truly is, which is outside of time and place. And in that final scene, that cloak, I remember how much it mattered to me how fine that cloak was, that it was virtually see-through, but it still had all of the qualities of the original sort of almost peasant, like it. And so in that respect, you are not wrong, my friend. I just don't recognize it as my journey until I look back at it and go, those are the kinds of things that you're reaching for. And sometimes it takes people outside to see, what's happened versus the people who are in the good fight.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm glad we could talk about that. We're all kind of putting our minds together. Said I was going to try to help make you think, Nyla. So
yeah. I've been trying to avoid thinking. God damn it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I love this scene.
I love this scene as well, especially because there's so much storytelling. They're showing Middle-earth coming together, and it's the start of new and very different lives for everybody involved. What was your direction behind this scene, and how did the fabrics and textiles play a role throughout your process of the trilogy?
We should mention this is the coronation scene at the end of Return of the King, too.
Yeah. I've got a pencil drawing of that floating around here somewhere. Yeah, it's, God, I don't know. I know this was we were exhausted. This was right at the end. It became much, much bigger. It was a huge effort when everybody was just out of ideas, imagination. And I remember that, like searching and searching and searching for what color to put live in. Like no color seemed right. And I remember that really clearly, like we were trying this and trying that. And I was just like, no, it's not working. And, not in a mean way. It was more I'm going to cry way. It's not working. I can't. What is that color? And I don't know how or when or whether it was in the drawing. You're going to make me, I'm going to go looking for this. But that green, it tells a story all by itself. And at the minute that I found that color, it's such a weird color, huh?
Oh, yeah.
And it says spring, it says renewal, it says future. And so once you've got the color, everything else is just happening all by itself. Liv's dresses were incredibly simple because she was just such a magnificent young woman, just so extraordinary, just so beautiful. And then again, back like the how much more could I have added without turning it into a full crown? So to hold that crown in elven world, in elven design, and then, and I remember looking at it and then wanting, more and more, and just the beautiful, that is as close to perfect as you can get when you're, it was a really stunning moment. And I think it was shot really quickly, almost dismissively.
Oh,
scene,
wow.
just because, you forget that when you're looking at something on screen, you think, but it was just something that had to be done. And I almost feel for the costume department, and I could be completely wrong about this, but this is the memory that I have. It was shot in the back of the studio, not far from the costume shop, piles of rubble here, there, and everywhere that have been kind of cleared away, and this area. And it was just, we need to get this sort of moment, and all the costume team were down there just having a moment, but the moment was very short.
Right. So back to work.
You don't necessarily get to go, oh, how wonderful, look what we did. Beautiful, if I say so myself.
I got chills when you mentioned renewal and spring. That's such a good way to put it.
Yeah, it was, and I mean, it really is the only romance in the film, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
That's it. It's we follow these two through, and it's such a, I don't know, just lets everybody breathe after all of that, the stuff Pete really likes, the battles and the blood and we need a bit of romance, and there it is.
Yeah, it's definitely a breath of fresh air after everything that happened.
Exactly. There you are. Yes.
It's a great payoff. And every time I watch a film, I'm usually just blown away by the sheer scale of this film. So I want to take this moment to really talk about collaboration, which I could imagine, as we've talked about, is so essential to the process, especially this film. So what was it like just reflecting, working with your crew, Sir Richard Taylor, of course, and maybe even the visual effects department, who must have had a huge role perhaps in creating some of the characters like the dead men of the hill, who might have been a part of the process?
Visual effects, not so much, because inevitably all of that is going to happen afterwards, and very much on this show. But Richard, Weta, costume, props, it was really one big family. And, like big families, we had big fights.
Large army scale fights.
Yeah, we would get really pissed with each other. And I reckon all of us had good reason. So, none of us can be let off the hook for that one. But in that, final tradition of family, we're going to come together and get the job done. And so there was a lot of toing and froing, I'm sure the guys down at Weta, wanted to kill me one day, and I wanted to go down and kill them, and none of us did. And I think we still really like each other and respect each other. but that's the passion, like how much it mattered. And I would hope that in filmmaking, ultimately, you never lose that. It's that fight for ideas, and we just, you just don't know, like this was Fran and Pete's just guts to go through everything they went through. I mean, there were some horrible times because everybody was very tired at one point, because Pete couldn't tell from a drawing anymore whether it was what he wanted or didn't want. So we would end up making 3 dresses for every one that was going to go on screen.
Jeez.
Yeah.
And that was really tough. That was really tough for everybody. But in the end, it was the smart thing to do, like was to just be gritty and go for it. And when I was trying to be positive about it, I would go, well, it's such an opportunity to test out ideas, and we've always got a place to use what we haven't put on those people, on those actors, or they can recycle into something else. I'm not sure whether that ever happened, but that was my happy place.
Right.
Oh my God, look at her.
Well, all the passion certainly paid off in just having such a beautiful, seamless, classic trilogy. And The Return of the King won numerous awards, including the Academy Award for Best Costume Design. How did it feel to receive such recognition? And looking back, what has the experience on Lord of the Rings meant to you?
I'm eternally grateful to the Academy for having costume design almost the first award at that night. I think if I'd been, if it had been number 15 or 20, I would have been an absolute wreck. And I had this, I had been told, I'd been at a hairdresser's, and it was getting that lovely hairdo. And I had it was a Sunday, so it was closed, and there was my Japanese hairdresser that I knew really well from time in LA, but there was one other woman there getting her hair done, and she was obviously someone from a costume department, but she was talking to her hairdresser and saying, well, I think Ngila Dickson's, she's not going to win because she's going to count herself out, because of course I had Last Samurai in the same ceremony, and she said she's going to split the vote, and it's going to go to, I can't remember which one it was.
What horrible math. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, that's true.
That makes a lot of sense.
That makes a lot of sense. So in a way, I had completely resolved in my mind that there was no way we were going to win for costume. And but then I also had this kind of terrible dread that if I won for Last Samurai, I would be a headline in the papers in New Zealand saying, Dickson ruins Jackson's clean sweep.
Oh no, that's horrible.
So that's a really happy Ngila face.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I remember standing on the stage, and the wonderful Ken Watanabe was in the front row, and Nicole obviously was in the front row, and Nicole Kidman. And, while most people are just zoned out in the ceremonies, which, both Ken and Nicole were right there with me. I remember it so clearly, like they really were, while I was talking, on my side, my friends, I've never met Nicole in my life.
So then looking back on all this, what has this experience meant to you just personally and professionally as you went on from Lord of the Rings? Do you look back just with utmost gratitude, joy, proud, a little bit of a headache?
All of the above.
Yeah.
It's completely surrounded by emotion on every level. As I said before, I am still and will always be a massive fan of my team, who we continue to work together as a team for a lot of years. And now, people like Lizzie designing their own shows, and, like this extraordinary creative people have come out of this world. And it allowed me to be able to work in the world while living here in New Zealand, which I love. I'm a true wanderer. And the one thing I do know about myself is, you back me into a corner and I'm going to get out of it somehow.
Well, costume designer Ngila Dickson, this has been a true honor. I can't tell you how grateful for you that you came and talked with us. This has been an absolute joy. So thank you for talking with us.
Yes, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Hope we meet somewhere someday.
Yeah, I mean, do you have anything you want to plug? Any fun films coming up, or everything hush hush?
Everything's a bit hush hush right now, but
well, everyone listening, just search the internet, see if you can figure out what Ngila's doing. Once again, thank you, Ngila. This has been wonderful.
Okay, you guys, you take care.
Hi, this is Dan, audio engineer of the podcast, here to let you know that if you wanted to support the show, you can head over to theartofcostume.com/podstore. There you can buy some awesome TeePublic merch with the podcast logo, such as a shirt, coffee mug, stickers, and of course, a baby onesie. Thanks for all your support.
That is everything I hoped for and more.
Yeah, I feel like I've fallen and I can't get up right now. Like I need help. That was such a fun interview.
Right?
It was everything I ever wanted, honestly. I love Ngila Dickson, and I just feel like the biggest costume nerd right now. Just overall nerd, right? On top of the moon. Don't have words.
I know. And I don't know. I'm so overwhelmed.
We just don't know what to say.
I know. Especially because I was just telling Spencer, I was like, I had to keep all my fangirl inside and be a professional and not freak out.
I was really trying to. I feel like I slipped a little bit more than you did because my costume nerd level was right on the edge the entire time.
It was. I'm just thankful I'm a shy person with new people in general. That anxiety just helped roll me in.
Man, but we learned so much. I mean, she said multiple times that, we probably already know this or that. But what's funny is there actually really isn't a lot of recorded history of the costume design of the Lord of the Rings. It's all kind of I don't want to say made up, but it's like assumptions, which is why I was talking about the assumptions behind Gandalf and whatnot, because it's really not well documented. Maybe in the behind the scenes on the DVDs, but that's about it.
And it's the articles I was reading about it, they're kind of, they're basic, and they're on the older side. And I feel like I bring this up almost every episode, 15, 20 years ago, journalists weren't scrambling to talk to costume designers and record their thoughts and feelings and processes in the moment when things are happening like we do today. So it was exciting to hear I feel like she started out with things we'd heard or read before, but then she went into detail, which was so exciting.
Yeah, I feel like we built a pretty good record here, and I'm eternally grateful to Ngila Dickson for joining us. It was a process. We've been working with her for maybe 2 months trying to get this to happen, and it happened, and I'm just super happy and grateful. So
Thank you for making that happen. Because I remember you were like, I'm going to go track her down. And I was like, good luck with that, Spencer.
Yeah, no, honestly, I didn't believe in myself. Elizabeth, I think we need to play our favorite game one last time for this year.
Yes.
All right, let's do it.
Daniel, hit it.
The one costume to rule them all.
Spencer, for The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, what is your one costume to rule them all?
So I'm actually very excited about this because I've had my costume has changed now after that interview, which is quite monumental if you think about it for someone who watches this movie every single day, you know, their entire life.
Yes.
The way that Nyla talked about Arwen's coronation dress at the end, the green color, the idea that spoke to spring and awakening and hope and all of that storytelling, I loved that. It was just like it really took me onto the side of that dress. And I just felt, I literally got chills when she was talking about it because it was just, because when you think about it, it's such like a great period to put at the end of this entire trilogy. And it's so subtle, just like in the colors of this costume. So I just thought that was just masterclass costuming. And that would not have been my original choice. I probably would have said something like Gandalf or any of the examples of armor, Aragorn's armor. But yeah, I'm team Arwen fully with this film in particular.
And Spencer, like, what is your problem? Can you hear that?
Yeah, I heard the cat meow this time. Arwen, we get it. This is a big moment for you.
I know. One of the people who created your namesake was just here, but you slept through it. So don't try and come in here now and act like you were part of the conversation.
You had your chance, Kitty, and you blew it. I really was hoping you were going to bring the cat out during the podcast, but I don't know how Nyla would have reacted to the cat.
Here's my cat, Eowyn.
She would have been like, what the fuck?
Well, see, okay, so this was going to be my thing. If this did, like, if Eowyn just, like, started bothering us, yeah, I was going to be like, this is my cat, Eowyn. She's 17 years old. I got her as a kid.
Jeez.
To be like, I named her as a child.
All right, Elizabeth, what was your one costume rule them all?
Spencer, honestly, I could not have agreed. It's the green dress. I couldn't agree more. Originally, it was Eowyn's armor because
it's a good one. That's probably my second.
Yeah. And it's such a badass moment, especially, you know, the Lord of the Rings, like it's a male dominated story. There's no getting around that.
Yeah.
But what I do love about it is that the women that are in it, they are not passive characters, especially not Eowyn. And she comes alive in that armor and she does the most.
Yeah, she saves the day.
She does. But that green dress, like talking about it, hearing the story, how she got to that place where it was something so full of meaning. It's perfect. And it caps off just the story, like the story of everyone but the hobbits. Like obviously like we get a little bit more of what they go on to do. But for Aragorn, Arwen, Eowyn, Legolas, Gimli, like all of them, like it's capped off in that moment with that green dress to be like, okay, here's the new beginning.
Yeah, this is such a beautiful way to put it. Man, that really like rocked my whole world when Nyla talked about that dress. I thought she was going, oh yeah, we picked green because, you know, elves and they like the forest. But no, she dug that dagger right into my heart. And I was oh, that's so good.
So good.
Oh, Elizabeth. And that brings us to the end of this entire season 3. That's a wrap.
I know. It's wild.
But if you all want to tell us what your one costume rule them all is from the Return of the King, or maybe just throughout the entire season, what were some of your favorite episodes and costumes? Leave us a voicemail at 626-515-1826. Remember, we don't pick up the phone. It's just a voicemail box, so it just goes directly to a nice little pile for us to listen to. And you can email us at theartofcostume@gmail.com.
And And the Art of Costume podcast will return January 16th, 2024.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, we won't be going away completely. We'll still be on Instagram at the Art of Costume Pod, on TikTok at the Art of Costume. It's the holidays. If you need a little gift for your favorite costume nerd or just a little something to keep you warm in these winter months, you can get some Art of Costume merch at theartofcostume.com/podstore. And if you would like to give us a wonderful, very much appreciated gift this holiday season, please leave us a 5-star text review on Apple Podcasts.
That would be the gift that just keeps on giving.
Oh, yeah.
Elizabeth, it has been an absolute pleasure working alongside you on this season. And a big shout out to Daniel, our audio engineer, who has worked from beginning to end on all these episodes, a lot of bonus interview episodes of costume designers. So please, just like a round of applause for Daniel. We love you. It wouldn't be possible without you.
Yes.
It wouldn't be possible without all of you listening. It has been an incredible season, and we love you all, and we'll be back in January. So I can't wait.
Thank you, and see you then.
The Art of Costume blogcast is hosted and produced by Elizabeth Joy Glass and Spencer Williams. Our audio engineering and editing is done by Dan White. Follow us on Instagram at The Art of Costume Pod, or visit the artofcostumeblogcast.com for all blogcast updates. If you want to support the show, go to theartofcostume.com/podstore. For more costume reviews, deep dives, and interviews, head over to theartofcostume.com, a blog dedicated to highlighting the best in costume design.
Sorry. Anyone just gave me a weird look.